Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to Lion's Heart. And in this video, I'm going to be discussing the three major tiers of personal development that I've seen in my life. And in the last 10 years, I've been studying very diligently and very persistently different philosophies on life, the best ways to live life, different perspectives, different spiritual systems, different philosophers, different psychologists. Basically anything I can get my hands on that feels original and new and true. So I'm not really going into religious dogma or kind of unintelligent, like red pill kind of content. But if someone seems like they know what they're talking about, they seem like they're grounded, they have a holistic way of going about it, then I'm more than open to hearing their perspective and seeing what they have to say and integrating it into my own vision, right? Because at the back of my mind, I've always had this burning question: what is the best way to live life, right? Like, we're here in these human bodies, we're just kind of thrown here. We don't really know what we're doing here, what's going on, or what the best way to live is, which is one of the reasons I think people kind of look around so much for leadership, and we look around so much to see what others are doing, because there is this deep confusion on a certain subconscious level of what the fuck is this and what am I supposed to do here, and like, how do I best feel best and live best, right? And I think this confusion causes a lot of problems, right? It causes a lot of problems because we go and do things that aren't necessarily good for us, but we kind of just follow the herd, right? And it's this herd mentality that can really hurt us, because we're doing things that we're told are good for us, we're being followers, and it's not actually coinciding with our reality and our lived reality, right? A good example of this is like people who join cults or something like that, where they just join it to feel a sense of belonging or fitting in, and then 6 months later they're drinking Kool-Aid in like some kind of suicide pact, right? Anyway, that's a bit of a tangent, but what I'm getting at is that it's very powerful to listen to different perspectives and kind of get this integrated vision, this map of what is the best way to live life, what is wisdom, what is truth, these kinds of things. And some of the questions that I ask are things like, what are the best habits to implement? How important are relationships? How do we relate to our sexuality in terms of masculinity and femininity and these things? How do we become attractive in dating? How important is money? Like, how much money is important? What do we need there? Things like power, morals, values, all of these different things. And I think this is a lifelong contemplation. I don't think there's one simple answer to this. I think it's very complex, which we'll dive into in this video, the complexity of it all. And I think we live in a time where we have so many different perspectives, which is such a gift. I don't think people realize how much of a gift it is that you can turn on YouTube or something like that. You can type in something that you're interested in. You can get thousands of different perspectives on it, and you can get the top thinkers, you can get the leading thinkers, the cutting edge of it. You can go read books, you can find the best books, you can get audios and podcasts. I mean, it's incredible if you really take advantage of the time that we live in. Even 20 years ago, this wasn't possible, right? So I think there's really a huge opportunity in the time that we live in to really develop yourself and become a super intelligent human. And there's really no excuse to not live life in the best way possible these days, is my opinion. But at the same time, we get all these different opinions, these conflicting viewpoints, these different teachers, and a lot of the times they're both good teachers, right? They're both saying a positive message. They're both sharing something, positive and wise, but they're contradicting each other, right? And we see this all the time. They're contradicting each other. They're saying, one guy is saying one thing, one guy is saying something completely different, right? So I think what's important today, to be a consumer of information today, to be someone searching for wisdom, to be someone wanting, the truth and the best way to live, it's not to follow one distinct path, one distinct spiritual path or philosophy or things like that. I think some people say that. Some people say the best thing to do is to dig one well and go deep. And I used to think that was true, but actually I don't think that's true anymore. I think what you want to be is a integrator, right? You want to dig, if we're using that one well, dig deep tunnel kind of metaphor, you want to dig the tunnels connecting to each other, if that makes sense. Maybe you go medium depth, but you got like 20 different tunnels connecting, versus just one where you go deep, but you have no idea about the other aspects of life. And I think that a lot of people are limiting themselves to aspects of life and reality that are very fucking important, and have real life consequences, right? That if you don't understand, there's going to be consequences for that, right? Let's say you finally you get really into discipline and habits in the gym and these things, but you don't work on your dating or your sexuality or your attraction or understanding the opposite sex psychology and what makes them tick, right? Then that's going to actually play out, and maybe you have to go through some heartbreak, maybe you get cheated on, maybe these things, and these are very real things that happen in reality, right? So I'm not saying to come into a fear mindset, but why wouldn't you empower yourself as much as you possibly can, right? And people closing their minds to things like consciousness and awareness and spirituality, I mean, that's a whole domain of life that can give you true lasting happiness that you're just missing out on because your mind is closed. So I think the most powerful position to come from today is to have an open mind, to not get too swayed by different perspectives, but to be able to take them in and integrate them. And if you're familiar with spiral dynamics, this is something more like stage yellow, like the integral stage, being able to take in different perspectives and then kind of place them on value based on what you need and things like that. So on that point, I also want to say that these levels, they're not, this isn't a value system. I'm not saying that tier 3 and tier 2 and like there's a different level of importance, because the importance is subjective, right? Some people, they really need tier 3. They really need to work on like discipline and habits and things like that. They don't need to go meditate more. They don't need to go do more retreats. They need to get their finances down and their health down and their fitness down and things like that, and their shit together, right? They need more structure, right? And some people are too lost in theorizing and philosophies and sexual dynamics and dating dynamics and making money and business and these things and understanding, right? They're just too lost in understanding. They're sitting at home reading books all day, but they're not taking any action, right? They could go back and they could go into something like tier 3, right? Some people, they're just completely lost in the material world and they have no idea about these more higher aspects of reality, like awareness and truth and things like this. So they could benefit from going a little bit into tier 1, right? Consciousness and spirituality. And we'll learn about these tiers in a second here. I'm just making a point that it's different for everybody, right? It's really about balancing out this kind of content, balancing out these inputs and this wisdom, and then making it work in a way and fitting it into a way that works for you at your time, at your certain points in life, right? So with that, let's dive in. Hey, what's up guys? Hope you're enjoying the video. I just wanted to make a quick announcement that I'm going to begin doing one-on-one coaching with people who are ready to take things to the next level. If you want direct one-on-one assistance, one-on-one guidance, and you like the channel, you like this content, then let me know, shoot me an Instagram DM, and we can begin talking. And really what's powerful about coaching is that I get to work with you one-on-one. I get to hear your problems, I get to hear where you're at, and then we can also have that accountability. And that can really help take things to the next level rather than just watching videos or reading books or things like that. It can really kind of take things to the next level. So shoot me a message if you're interested and let's chat. All right, so to kick us off, we're going with tier 3. And tier 3 is about 95% of what we see in the personal development world, right? This is what most people are consuming. This is what the most popular kind of authors and teachers are. These are the guys who, they really get the most attention because it is very direct. It's very straightforward. There's not a lot of nuance. There's not a lot of understanding that has to happen. It's just, basically, it's just discipline, motivation, habits, and kind of getting over laziness, right? Which I actually think is what most people need, right? Most people kind of need that content to get them up, to start taking action, to stop being lazy, to stop being comfortable, right? And so that's what this tier is about. It's about getting you pumped up, getting your ass off the couch, get out there and go do it, go take action, make things happen, things like that, right? And tier 3 is really about measurable objective goals, right? So it's about, did you do 20 push-ups in the gym today? Did you make 100K last year? Did you, right? It's not a lot of nuance. There's not a lot of room for interpretation. It's like tier 3 is like, get your ass up and do it and go get after it and like stop complaining, right? Stop whining, right? And I think this is very powerful to help people to create discipline, to get their habits down, to kind of get momentum, to get in the right grooves, to get that structure going. And really what it is the bedrock, right? It's the bedrock of your life, right? So these teachers can be really helpful in getting you to really kind of like get that foundation, get that bedrock, get that, that layer of, strength. And it builds your self-esteem, it builds your confidence. You start to see what you're capable of. So this is absolutely foundational for living a great life, right? You need to take care of this. Without this, the other tiers are basically useless. Like every other personal development and wisdom and self-help and even like meditation practices are going to be kind of useless if you don't have, these proper things taken care of, right? So this is like sleep, gym, fitness, health, money, having your finances down, having a good environment, having stability, these kinds of things. So this is very important. It's a very important tier. And I think tier 3 is very powerful for helping people to get back to their stronger self, right? I think that human beings are very strong creatures, right? We're not fragile. We think we are. We've been kind of coddled and conditioned to think we are. But if you look at the actual evolution of human beings, we are very resilient, strong, incredible creatures. We can go through immense amounts of trauma, pain, physical discomfort. I mean, look at all the wars. Look at how natural. If you look at how like indigenous natural people live, it's not super comfortable. There's bugs biting them. They're sleeping on wood. It's dirty, these things, So I'm not saying that's ideal, but I'm just saying we're much stronger than we've been kind of conditioned and coddled to think we are. And I think that what tier 3 does is it helps us get back to that strength. It helps us remind ourselves that we can push through the pain. We can push through and find this like breakthrough and find this stronger side to ourselves, right? So that's kind of like the basis for tier 3. Tier 3 can be kind of black and white. Like it can be very, there's not a lot of room for nuance, right? It can be very dogmatic about, drinking's bad, partying's bad, don't waste your time, don't sit around and do nothing, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, get up at 3 a.m. and work out and go to the gym and like work on your business and handle your family and like these things. So it's good in that sense, but it can also be a little bit dogmatic there, right? So some examples of tier 3 would be people like David Goggins, Jocko Willink, maybe like Jordan Peterson, kind of like books like Atomic Habits or books like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Joe Rogan, like this kind of disciplined mentality, right? And so tier 3 can really help people get out of a rut. It can really help people to move towards their goals. It can kind of give them a sense of urgency. And it can kind of help them get that kick in the ass they need to start doing the more important things in life. However, tier 3 is a bit limited, and I find that it's limited in that there's a bit of a scarcity mindset. There's a bit of a fear mindset, A lot of these teachers, they talk about, someone's coming to get you. There's a loser and a winner in life. This has to be competitive. People want to kick you down. And that you always have to push through pain, right? It doesn't make a lot of room for things like joy and love and like enjoying life and healing and, all of these things. It's like, yes, go to the gym and take care of these things, but it doesn't have to always be hell. It doesn't have to be like every morning you're pushing through hell, right? It's like you can also enjoy your discipline and your habits, and you're not always prepping for some horrible thing in life to happen, right? Because this is kind of a negative, ultimately this is coming from a fearful, negative mindset, right? So I think that's where tier 3 can be a little bit lost. There's not a lot of emphasis on feelings or understanding why we're feeling a certain way, right? It's just push through, go to the gym, wake up, you feel like shit, just go to the gym. And it's like, well, hold on, like let's maybe take a second and talk to a therapist or do some journaling or do some meditation. Like, why am I feeling this way? What are these emotions? What's coming up? Why is there this like resistance every morning? Why is there this anger? Why, because I think that they take those feelings and they turn them into fuel, right? And they turn that into something you need to like work with and push through. But I think that only works for so long until you burn out, right? And not everyone is David Goggins. You just keep pushing through. Like, you also need to take care of yourself. You need to nurture yourself. Some days the body doesn't want to go do a fucking 10K or some crazy gym routine, and that's okay. You can skip the gym for a day and like everything will be okay, So I think that that's where they're kind of missing nuance. There's a lack of like love. There's a lack of heart and love and like self-compassion and self-care, right? And there's a lack of understanding. They don't really question why things are the way they are. Why am I feeling this way? Things like that. It's very like, militaristic mentality, right? And a lot of these guys are Navy SEALs. They are in the military, things like that. So that's kind of what they've been conditioned. And they might think, talking about your emotions and working through these things is kind of fruity or weak or something like that, but it's not. It's very key to living a good life, right? So that's my general take on Tier 3. I think it's a really powerful, beautiful stage, don't get me wrong, but I think it's not the whole truth. I think that if you take it to be the whole truth and you only listen to like David Goggins type content and these kind of guys, you're going to miss out on a lot of life, and I think eventually you will burn out, right? It's just not enough to have a complete holistic psychology, to have a complete holistic way of living. There's still going to be a lot of aspects of life that you're missing out on, right? So with that, let's move on to Tier 2. So Tier 2 is very interesting. Tier 2 is more when we come into a place of understanding and social dynamics and the self and emotions and psychology and life purpose and a vision and things like that. And I'd like to just read what I have for Tier 2 as an explanation here, because I think the text is really good. So, so Tier 2 is more focused on dynamics of life. It is more rooted in understanding, mastery, and knowledge. Tier 3 was more about taking action and doing things in the world that you can objectively measure, like did you wake up at 7 a.m., did you go to the gym, where are you in relation to your goals? Whereas Tier 2 is more about actually understanding more subtle dynamics of life and relating from that place. It is also about changing your experience of reality in life, which ties into psychology, emotions, mindsets, archetypes, ideal self, visions, and purpose. The main domains we see this in are around dating, business, sexuality, socializing, and there's a strong emphasis on research and data, psychological trends, mentality, finances, value systems, and individual success. There is a strong emphasis on the value you carry or provide and how to increase that, along with how that relates to social dynamics and especially sexual dynamics. And there's still a strong emphasis on habits and discipline, yet it goes into a more nuanced topics that are subtle or psychological. So what does this mean? Tier 2 is basically focused on the more subtle, nuanced, conceptual layers of reality, right? If Tier 3 was about going to the gym and hitting your weights and things like that, Tier 2 is much more about understanding what's going on in human dynamics, sexual dynamics, psychology, emotions, things like that. So we can see it more layered in this complex mind layer of reality, right? This taps more into things like your vision, your purpose, things like that. So Tier 2 is very focused on these dynamics, and it can help you to increase your understanding and relative power in these domains, right? And if you get a good Tier 2 teacher who really understands something like dating or business mindsets or visioning or things like that, they can really help you get to the next level, right? And I think this is kind of the next layer of life, right? This is the next layer of reality that you need to move on to after you have the foundation down, right? Because you can have your discipline and your money and these things down, but you can also still be really bad with talking to women, or you're still really socially awkward or things like that. And that's another issue I find with the discipline level, is that these guys, maybe they're really disciplined and like big bodies and like, but they have no idea how women work, right? And their relationships are failing and things like that. So that's where Tier 2 comes in, right? And it can be quite shocking and jarring for people who haven't heard it before, because it goes against our Disney fantasies, right? It goes against our kind of like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed ideas of social dynamics and sexual dynamics, and it can expose us to, holy shit, this is not what I thought it was, right? And it can kind of break a lot of that conditioning and programming, and it's important to know this and not get lost in it, but to at least know the foundation of this, the fundamentals of this, so that you can, better navigate the world and understand the dynamics that are happening anyway. However, Tier 2 can be limited because it can be a little too pessimistic in this. It's a little bit too survival based, right? Like, I do believe that there is still that element of love, right? It doesn't really make room for what I would call true love, right? And it doesn't really give space for that or acknowledge it. It can also be way too philosophical. You can end up listening to hours and hours of Tier 2 material, like Dr. K, or like Dating Dynamics, or Orion, or Chris Williamson, and like all these things that are going. You can kind of just run yourself in circles, right? It's like you can kind of get lost in that world where you listen to like 20 hours of dating material and then you go talk to like 3 girls, right? It's like you need to be taking way more action than sitting and listening to theory, right? That's where you're actually going to learn, is out in the world, out in reality. And tier 2 can be a little bit too philosophical, intellectual, conceptual, right? The last thing I would say that's a limitation on tier 2 is that it's very dual, right? It's very much about the ego, increasing your dating opportunities, increasing your personal power, making more money, these things. And it's not talking a lot about the non-dual, the spiritual aspects of life, right? It's very much about you as an ego, you as an individual, you as a person, and increasing your power. And some examples of tier 2 could be like Orion Taraban, Chris Williamson, Dr. K, Mel Robbins, Tony Robbins, these kinds of teachers, this kind of material. So overall, I think it's very powerful and it's very necessary and important to learn these things and to work on your emotions and psychology and dating dynamics and personal power as an ego, as a person. But it's lacking the full picture, right? It's lacking the full picture. And I think it gets lost in power a little bit. It gets lost in understanding and manipulation and strategy. So it's kind of this crux, right? Because it's tough, because a lot of socializing and human dynamics are manipulation, right? Like that's just the truth of it. And so it's this balance of being authentic, being honest, but also playing the game a little bit, using these structures, knowing that there's a lot of deceits out there and finding that balance. So I think that coming into tier 2 really takes more nuanced perspective from the listener, right? They have to learn how to integrate this into a way that works for them, that's authentic to them, while still taking in these principles and teachings. All right, now let's move on to tier 1. So tier 1 is what I call the consciousness and awareness and the spiritual domain, right? So this is where you start to get introduced to spirituality, to consciousness. This is where we could say you transcend the whole game of personal development, of all of these things that people are doing, the survival stuff that is in the other tiers, is now beginning to be transcended, right? Now you're starting to find happiness that's unconditional, right? This is where you start to look at meditation, self-inquiry, things like that, consciousness, awareness, right? People usually come here for 2 main reasons. They usually are burnt out in life, they've hit some kind of wall, they've had some kind of trauma, they've had some kind of really difficult thing, and they're just kind of surrendering to what life is. And in that surrender, they find spiritual teachers, they find consciousness, they find these things. Another group of people that come here is that they've kind of played the game of life, right? They've done tier 1, they've done their habits and their discipline, their foundation, their life is stable. They've moved on to tier 2, they've done the dating, they've got a good relationship, they've got personal power, they've got respect, they know how to work with people, their emotions are strong, these things. But there's still something missing, right? There's still something missing in their lives. They're not fully fulfilled. So then they kind of move into this final domain, the consciousness domain, right? And this is where, we really start to be happy no matter what, because we are that awareness, because we are that wholeness, that perfection that doesn't need anything outside of itself, right? And so that's where we kind of move into things, teachers like Sadhguru, Adyashanti, Peter Ralston, Ken Wilber, Ramana Maharshi, Yogananda, these kinds of things, meditation, yoga, these kinds of practices and things like that. And it's really powerful because you begin to find happiness without condition. You begin to really dissolve the layers of ego, dissolve the layers of delusion and things like that, and move into a more powerful way of living. However, tier 1 can be limited in that it can be a little bit dogmatic and that they don't address the other tiers, right? Like tier 1 usually will not talk about sexual dynamics and female psychology or male psychology and like the kind of the brutal truth of that as well. And they don't really put a huge emphasis on like discipline and habits and like stop being a bitch and like get up, because sometimes you need to stop being a bitch and you need to like do these things, right? And tier 1 will never talk to you like that, right? It'll always kind of coddle you. It's always kind of going to love, things like that. So it can be problematic in that sense, right? But overall, I think tier one is extremely powerful. I mean, that's really where I know I said this isn't a value system, but like tier one is where true happiness exists, right? If there's one tier that if you had to choose one, like gun to your head, you had to choose one philosophy or way, I would say tier one is the most important because, you know, if you went all the way with it, like Ramana Maharshi, you can be sitting in a cave with a loincloth and have no dating skills, have no money, have no gym, and be completely content and happy. Whereas for the other tiers, you can't say the same, right? You can master those tiers and still be completely miserable or lost in other areas of life. So there it is, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This is kind of just an overview. And where do you also see this this tier, these layers, right? Lion's Heart, right? That's what this channel is about, actually. And I just realized recently that this is actually equal to what I'm doing with the tier system in the blueprint, in the Lion's Heart blueprint, right? So I actually found that I had already made that model, and then later I realized that these teachers were falling into that model, right? Like I didn't make the model out of the teachers, if that makes sense. I made the model, and then I realized, holy shit, a lot of these teachings and teachers are actually falling into this model. And I'm not saying I'm like some genius. I'm just saying this is that Stage Yellow integrative mindset, and that there's consistencies in reality, right? We also see this with like the hierarchy of needs pyramid as well. It's like very similar to this, right? So I think this is a very true dynamic that's happening in reality. And like I said, it's important to integrate all of these aspects and to really be the molder of your own life, the creator of your own life, right? Take all these different perspectives and aspects and build what you want to out of it, right? Like, do you want to be a habits disciplined badass? Then put the energy into that and integrate into that. Put more emphasis on that. Do you want to be more of a yogi monk? Then like put like 90% on that, but then have 5% your habits, 5% your sexuality and dating, right? So that's what's so cool about this and so cool about the time we live in, is that you can really create whatever you want and take in all of these different aspects and really create something powerful. So with that, I'm going to sign out, and lots of love, guys. Talk soon. Cheers.